Welcome to Tell Me Your Story. New paradigms for a new world where we're giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. We are here 9 times a week. Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., Wednesdays at 9 a.m., and Monday through Friday from 8 to 9 a.m., streaming live at all those times at richarddugan.com. We are on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, as well as YouTube, where you can watch these conversations. I hope that you will take time to subscribe and click notifications so that when a new conversation is posted, you'll be notified and you'll be able to tune in, listen in, and learn, be entertained and inspired. A reminder that Choices, which is my book, 5 Steps for Life, it's available on Amazon.com in paperback, hardcover, and Kindle with Audible, soon to be released. We also ask that if you can support the work that we are doing financially, we do have a PayPal account. It is there for your security as well as ours. And when they ask for an email address to whom you're sending, please go to richard@richarddugan.com. That's the email address. If you go to richarddugan.com, there is also a link directly to PayPal so that you can send us whatever support you can. And we thank you to those who have helped and to those who will help. We also ask that you take time during this decade of perfect vision, the 2020s, to go within to that quiet, peaceful, calm, still place and listen to that still, small voice. And with that, we now take you to our very special interview and guest here on Tell Me Your Story. Welcome to Tell Me Your Story. I am Reverend Dr. D. Richard Dugan. Thank you so much for joining us. And our very special guest, Tracy Doyle of tracydoyle.life, L-I-F-E, and her latest work, which is called Life Storm, Finding Your Clear Sky Practices to Overcome Negative Thinking, Building Connection, and Find Fulfillment. Tracy, welcome to our program. You're just what the doctor ordered, but not me, my doctor, which should be you.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here today.
It is interesting how sometimes these programs seem to follow certain events, And as I was sharing before we got started, my wife and I just moved as of this conversation 2 months ago. And it's been interesting dealing with not just the move, the packing, the getting out of the place that we were in, finding a house to buy and buying it and so forth. But then, of course, there are all the health issues that we're dealing with and so forth, and it's quite a challenge, life in general. And you have this wonderful book that actually you reveal, what is it, 8 practices in what's called the Aurora Method. Is that something that you created?
It is. And the Aurora Method is just really something that I wouldn't say I created each practice, but they were influences in my life that I have put together in 8 sort of step-by-step practices to help people overcome negative thinking and shift perspective.
It also, this is one of those things where you've got these 8 practices, and it deals with partly, redirecting fear-based and self-centered thinking.
Yeah.
And I was listening to a video or watching one. The question was asked, which is more important? More positive thinking or less negative thinking? And most people would probably say, well, more positive thinking. And of course, it's sort of kind of a trick question because it's actually less negative thinking.
Yeah.
But sometimes some of our thoughts we don't think of as negative. And I don't know if that's through justification or that we don't want to acknowledge that is sort of one of the words that I kind of like. I don't like to do it, and I don't like others doing it. But the word is self-deprecation.
Yep.
And we don't realize that we're doing it. And sometimes it's really subtle.
Hmm.
It can actually be the difference, couldn't it, between saying that's good versus that's not bad.
Hmm. Hmm.
Talk to us about this process of redirection.
Yeah, I think before I do that, I have to I want to share what got me here because,
Okay.
like you just said, I had no idea that I was really being driven by negative thinking, and I actually thought I was this, go-getter, positive person who could do anything and be anything I wanted to be because I grew up, I overcame some significant trauma. I actually grew up. My mom had me as a teenage pregnancy, and I didn't know my dad. And she had struggled with some mental illness, and I basically, became her caretaker by the age of 10 because she married a man that when I was 7 years old, that was an he was an alcoholic and a drug addict, and
Mm.
the devastating effects of that are, I don't need to belabor that. So many of us know what that looks like. But the truth is that I was driven at that point to help my family. And, I always grew up believing that I had to sacrifice myself for my mom, for my family, and then later in life for my job and for my relationship, for everything as I sort of grew up and grew out of poverty and first in my family to go to school. And as I was really becoming who I was becoming, which ultimately I became an entrepreneur, and I had a great career, and then I started my own company. I lost myself along the way, and what happened for me was, and this was my big turning point in transformation. What happened for me was, because I had grown up thinking I had to sacrifice myself, it was around the holidays. I had started really becoming so overwhelmed with all of life's responsibilities. And my thinking started going toward, you know, enough's enough. I'm done, and I remember the day. It was around the holidays. It was December 21st. It was 1999. And as I'm getting ready for work, I catch a glimpse of myself in the mirror, and my eyes were hollow, my spirit was dim, and I just looked so vacant. I was like so empty looking. And inside my head, I whispered, I'm done. I'm done.
Mhm.
And I was feel myself getting angry. I'm done taking care of my mom. I'm done taking care of my sister's kids. Sadly, my sister, like my mom, was also mentally ill, but unfortunately, she chose to use drugs. And so I had custody of her kids. So I was like Insta mom, and I was taking care of my mom, caretaker, trying to manage my own relationship. And I'm being pulled in every single direction at work because I had, assumed responsibility being an overachiever. And I thought, it was the holidays. If I got good and drunk, maybe I'd crash the car. And then I was like, yeah, if I do that, no one will ever know I didn't want to live anymore. And later that night, I was like jolted awake by someone knocking on my car window, yelling like, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" And I had gone through with my plan. And, I was like, oh my gosh, I was a hair away from a head-on collision. I I almost killed two people, and I was devastated. I was like, how did I get so lost? And I mean, I'm crying at this point. How do I get my life back? And so, that next day, when I realized what I could have done, it was like my head and my heart were arguing. It was like my head is, like you said, self-deprecating. I mean, more than that, it was self-condemnation. I mean, I was screaming at myself, like, Tracy, you almost killed two people. How could you do this? But my heart kept saying, but you're still here, And that moment, I just cried out, like I want my life back. I want to live again, and I always love the holiday oldie, It's a Wonderful Life. And
Oh,
I
yeah.
just felt like George Bailey in that moment. I'm like, I want to live again. But what that moment taught me was what's so important. It was, I would say, my first real lesson that, like, sacrifice isn't about abandoning yourself, right? It's about putting yourself first in the midst right? Of managing it all for everyone. But the big thing was that it meant for me that I had to get help and accept it. And over the course of my healing, and it felt like 10 years for me to get to this wisdom where I'm at right now, but the thing that I learned was that, it wasn't my mom, it wasn't my family, it wasn't my circumstances that were breaking me, it was my own belief system. And these beliefs of, I have to sacrifice myself for others, that specific belief took me to the breaking point.
Mm.
So as I started to unravel these belief systems, what I realized was that, and I was emotionally burned out. And so of course I had I was in the medical field, and I'm like, I want the data. Like, how do I fix myself? Right. Yeah. I went to therapy, and I was doing, taking medication. I was doing self-help work. And I mean, I was doing it all because I really wanted to get better. But what I was finding was I would still be reactive, and I would get really upset, right? And I'd be in conflict, and then I'd feel isolated. Well, what I realized was that it was beliefs that were shaped by early life experiences that I had internalized that were really driving my thought, behavior, and feeling process, if you will. And that really took me to a place where I had to learn how to shift perspective. And that's what the data said. You have to learn to shift perspective if you want to overcome burnout. And so as I did that, I started to realize that these old internalized beliefs were sort of what were triggering me. So it's like it wasn't my mom triggering me. It wasn't my job and my boss triggering me. It was just an old wound that I created a belief toward or about. So I'll give an example. Having my mom being someone who was mentally ill, sometimes she was emotionally available and many times she wasn't. As a kid, how do you internalize that? Nobody cares. So that nobody cares turned into, I always point to my middle of my head, to a belief of, a limiting belief of I'm not good enough. Then what I found was, when that was triggered, it hit a fear. And the fear was, I'll never belong. I'll never be, cared for, which then drove me in between my two ears to self-centered thoughts of I have to do everything myself. If no one
Mm.
cares, I have to do it all, which is a trait. It's self-reliance, which is a self-centered, I'm absorbed in being reliant and doing things myself.
Yeah.
What did that create to the outside world?
Yeah.
Right. So it created disconnect. So anyway, so to address the question, how do you shift it? I had to learn how to really see what those initial beliefs were, name the traits that were created by it, and change them.
Mm. It's interesting too because in my book, Choices, 5 Steps for Life, I talk about the messages that I received. And as I'm going through and editing it and listen, reading what I had written about where I was getting the messages
Mhm.
about myself, for whatever reason I had in there, I removed it because as I began to honestly look at that period, my family had absolutely no input whatsoever into the negative messages it all came from school. It all came from the bullies. My family could not have been more supportive. All right. When I was around, because see, when I got into 8th grade, I started delivering newspapers, and I spent most of the time out of school on the paper route, collecting money and doing this. And that seems to be one of the issues. I mean, my parents my mother, who is still alive, is fantastic. Um, when my wife was going through some challenges the couple 3 weeks ago, and my mother is still the type of woman. She's 91. She mails self-made or handmade note cards,
Aw.
and in this case, thank you cards or thinking of you cards or what have you. Then, about a week or so later, and by the way, hers was the very first piece of mail we received in our new post office box. Never had a
Aw.
post office box before. Then she sent a Christmas card, handmade Christmas card. Basically, best wishes for a joyous new year and a wonderful Christmas.
Aw.
Love, Mom. And I think about how my father was as well. The last real interaction, the last one, of course, was the day before he passed away. But it was a year ago, prior to a year before his death, that I was at their house for a memorial for my eldest sister, his eldest daughter. And to keep the story short, I made a little joke earlier in the evening, and he didn't like it. He says, when I ask a question, I want an answer. And I, of course, apologized, and I gave him the answer, the truthful answer. Later that evening, I'm making the bed up on the couch, and he comes walking into it and apologizes for getting upset. And I turned around and I just said, Dad, I love you. You'll always be my dad, and we're good.
Aw.
And those are the kinds of people that raised my four sisters, my brother, and I. Now, we siblings, of course, we never really put each other down or bully each other. We had the same kinds of little skirmishes that siblings have, but there were never any estrangements. I even knocked my brother's two front teeth out of his mouth when I threw a small little bedroom or bathroom garbage can at him. But we were still brothers. And I wonder too, you talk about perspective, which is part of what we talk about on this program too. What are some of the methods that you recommend for helping people to change the perspective? I'll share with you after what we talk about here on how to do that. But I want to hear from you as far as your book that we hope people will go get a copy of going to your website, which is tracydoyle.life, Life Storms. But tell us a little bit about the methods that you suggest for people to help to shift those perspectives to let that stuff go.
Yeah, well, first I just want to address what a great point you just made that I failed to say, which is what I've learned along my journey is that we're all wounded, right? And we've all had experiences. It doesn't mean it's parents and it's always within family. Because over the years, as I overcame my burnout and I started framing my practices, I started helping other women. And what I learned was, yeah, my experiences were pretty intense based on my life, but it wasn't a time to compare because as I was helping with other women, what I was seeing was one woman wants, like you, wonderful parents, and wonderful family. She grew up in a big family of I think 6 kids it was, and she was made fun of at school, and she internalized that, and it really took her down in
Mm.
relationships, with her marriage, and she just felt like she was never enough. Conversely, on another side of it, another woman, she was real high-powered job, and she was a physician actually, and she had parents that were super supportive, and there were kids that she felt rejected by. And what happened was she came home thinking it was her weight, that they were making fun of her because of her weight. She just simply asked one of her parents, "Am I fat?" And of course, her, parents being supportive wanted to dismiss what they said about her, but she took it as dismissal and felt like no one ever supported her. She carried that belief all through
Mm.
life, and it affected her at work. So, I want to just say that first. And so,
Mhm.
it's so important that we recognize that our life experiences shape our thinking. And when we recognize how, we have the chance to reshape it and change. And so for me, the practices in the book, what the Aurora Method is about, the first practice is really, and I look at the Aurora Method as 4 phases, right? So phase one is the first practice, which is self-assessment. And it's really, it's a look back on who hurt you or who are you angry with, what bubbles up. And for some people, it could be they're angry with their grandmother or they're angry with the kid, the bully at school, whatever it might be. It's usually, and what I have found, it's usually like 5 to 10 people, but repeated things that happen. And what you see is you ask yourself just simple questions. Well, what did they do? And how did it affect me? And what did I do in response? And then the hardest part of that self-assessment is really sort of defining those traits that you've developed as a result of how you responded. That to me is the most part of that, not the most part, but the hardest part of the work. Because you have to ask yourself repeatedly these questions. But why is it worth it? Well, it's worth it because the second phase of the Aurora method is what I call the breakthrough phase. And what you get to see is you get to kindly and compassionately look at how your life experience has shaped you. And what I will propose is that burnout is a pattern problem. It's a behavior pattern problem based on our beliefs. At least for me, it is, right? And this is through lived experience. So what we get to do is turn it around. We look at how our needs are affected. We look at those patterns. We look at our behavior and thinking. We look at our fears. And I don't want to make it sound like it's a belabored, laborious thing. It's check boxes. So you get to just really assess it like in a way where you're like, wow, it's pretty quick to look at this. And you're like, whoa. But the next thing I ask you to look at after that to really get to the big breakthrough, after you get to pattern recognition, is really looking at the refeels, as I call it. And to me, those wounds create when we refeel them. So it's a resentment, which comes from the French word refeel deeply. So what are we refeeling deeply? That's the trigger. It's usually a few things that we can see. And once we see them, we now recognize, okay, I'm refeeling that so we can feel more, react less, and shift our perspective and not snap or be in conflict with someone, or I call them who's right fights, because we get self-righteous over what way is the right way, or self-important, I'll show you, all these various traits that we can develop. Once we get through that, to me, the most poignant part of the method is the idea of establishing connection to yourself again and reestablishing connection with people that you might just feel at odds with. I don't mean, and yes, I've seen people fix estranged relationships. I've seen people repair marriages. Because what I find is that it's usually in our distorted thinking, our self-centered thinking, when we're refeeling these wounds out here, that we start to just think they this or they that, or we this and we don't that. So it gives you the ability to really recognize how you're contributing to that dynamic. And it's not that you're a bad person. It's, wow, if I shift the way I handle this, I start to shift the dynamics around me.
Hmm.
And all of a sudden it seems like they're better, but really it's us. It's us. It's their slow, gradual shift. So how do you do that? So basically what I typically do in the Aurora method is, I teach people how to develop their own personalized affirmations. So for me, if I'm in a situation where I'm in that refeel of I'm being, rejected by my mom and nobody cares and I don't belong, I have the ability now to say I'm worthy as I am and I belong right here.
Hmm.
And I can just chant that to myself and get through it and not have a reaction thinking I'm bristled and I'm going to push you away because I think you're rejecting me. In other cases, I had beliefs of, I have to do everything myself, right? Especially around the holidays. And I'd be slamming things around the kitchen as I was cooking for the family. And I don't have to do that anymore either, because I realized that self-reliance means just, I have to turn that around by saying I'm worthy of receiving help and I'm asking for help. And I ask and then I get it. And so it's really just easing back into life in a way where we don't feel like no one is supportive of us, no one's helping us, or that we're not good enough. So I hope that makes sense.
It does indeed, and it ties into the concept that I was dealing with 30 or 40 years ago when I was working for a Christian station, and I would hear, and I even read, of course, in the New Testament about how it says, Jesus says, "Be perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect." And I tried to wonder, I'm going, what does that mean? What does it mean to be perfect? I'm doing the best I can. I don't know, because perfection was doing everything, doing all the right things, being good, those kinds of things, being the light and all this kind of stuff, letting my little light shine. And then I remembered from the Old Testament the quote, God was saying, "I am that I am."
Mhm.
And I thought, okay, well, God is not dualistic. He's neither good nor bad, right or wrong, evil, good, that kind of thing, light, dark, etc., etc. So the conclusion I came to was basically what you're talking about is I am that I
Mhm.
am. I am perfect right here, right now, the way I have been created. And I think that's really what you're talking about. Tracy Doyle is our guest. Life Storms, Finding Your Clear Sky Practices through Overcoming Negative Thinking, Building Connection, and Finding Fulfillment at tracydoyle.life as we continue here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Reverend Dr. D. Richard Dugan with Tracy Doyle, and it is really a pleasure to have you with us here to talk about these things. You know, spotting, acknowledgement, spotting, acknowledging, and changing the beliefs and behaviors shaped by early life experiences. That manifests burnout and unravels relationships. It stunts, I should say, your ultimate success, and can create disconnection, isolation, and harm well-being as well. And then, of course, you can, through the Aurora Method, discover a framework for emotional healing. There's something that you're doing, and we'll go into some more of these aspects, the effects of these 8 practices in a moment. But one of the things that you are doing, I have found, is best described by the biblical passage that where Jesus is being questioned by his disciples, and they've been watching him for the last few days or weeks or whatever, and they say, "Hey, you know those things you're doing? You know, you're turning water into wine, and you're feeding the multitudes with." What is it? 4 loaves and 6 fishes, or whatever the number was, and raising the dead, and the blind can see, and the deaf can hear, and on and on and on and on. Could you teach us how to do that? Kind of like asking a magician the secret. And of course, his response, of course, is, "Well, sure, but let me tell you, if you think this is something, you guys are going to do greater works than these." And that's what I think you're about. And the greater works, as I see it, is transforming our lives.
Mhm.
And when one of us, such as yourself, finds a way to do that, that's part of what this program is about, is sharing those methods. Do you see yourself in that light, that you're trying to help people to transform their lives from maybe running on autopilot
Mhm.
to being consciously aware of who you are, what you are, where you are, and how you got here to the now, to this moment, and starting to do that self evaluation of taking a look, going within to understand, oh, I see, now I understand this is why I am the way that I am.
Yeah, you've said so much that I want to address. I think the one thing that I would say one of the books that I absolutely love was Emmett Fox's Sermon on the Mount, because it really teaches us how to align our thinking in terms of, in my mind, and I always do this, aligning my thinking to
Mm-hmm.
God. And I'm Christian, and part of my turning my perspective around is using not only prayer, but I like affirmative prayer, because I find that it really helps me align my thinking. And so, in terms of the transformation, yes. I mean, what I have found for myself is that there are so many people who feel disconnected today.
Mm-hmm.
And, I speak primarily to women because I have experience, but as I've been talking with more and more people, it's not to say men don't have burnout, men do too. But for me, I've been just speaking more to women right now, but I speak to both men and women, because what I find is that that sense of disconnection is really driven from internal beliefs, right? It's so all these things that we want, we can get when we learn how to shift. And the big question is always how? How do I do that? Because we're sort of, we're doers. We're human doing. We're human doing. We do. We're focused on achievement. We're focused on external success. And for me, I had all of that. I checked every box. I had the house and the car and the job, and I was the CEO, and I was all of it. But yet inside, I was so empty because I felt so isolated and alone. So what transformation looked like for me was two things. One was how to break through that isolation and aloneness and that feeling of apartness, which I think so many of us struggle with. And what I have found is that the method that I discovered for me, and as I said, I like to, I always joke, I like to connect the dots. And like, I read so many different things and I pull from here and I pull from there. So the Aurora method is nothing more than tried and true practices, but just lined up like 1 through 8, do these 6 things and then maintain this way with these 2 things, right? So that's pretty much what I do. And the maintain is all about once you understand what your beliefs are and you have the ability to shift them, when you start to feel disconnected or you start to feel, I always call it fine. I'm feeling frustrated. I might feel a little irritated. I might feel a little numb because I'm doing, or I might feel exhausted because I'm apart from myself. I'm not taking care of me, which so many of us do. So fine is the first is the first, if you will, triggering event. It's the first light bulb to say, when I hear myself saying fine, I need to check in with myself, right? But the transformation really happens when we can get to the point that I just said. When I hear myself saying fine, I know that I'm not. And basically taking the time to go within and learn what's driving us, and then using simple practices. So what do simple practices look like? 5 minutes of quiet in the morning, not running to the phone, checking in, right? And what I like to do is I always, once I knew what my traits were, which was self-reliance, self-importance, self-condemnation. I would condemn myself and blame myself for so many things. Self-deprecation from the perspective of really beating myself up
Mm-hmm.
for various things. I check in every night. How did I do today with that? Right. And I would ask myself, how did I do? Do I owe anyone an apology? Because I realized in some instances when those self-centered behaviors, or sometimes self-centered thoughts, so self-righteousness is a thought, it can be perceived as being arrogant and hurtful. So I'd have to check in and ask how did I do today? Do I owe anyone an apology? And I'd really run through my day. In the morning, I take the 5 minutes to just set my intention consciously, and I use affirmative prayer for that, which is, I'm centered and I'm calm and I'm kind and I'm understanding. I'm open and receptive to all the challenges today and embracing them as God's opportunity. And as I embrace it as the opportunity, I then affirm I'm handling it, whatever it is that I'm working toward.
Mm-hmm.
And that 5 minutes has changed my life. Now, what happens during the day? We all just get bombarded with just overload. We think we're doing these 7 things today. Next thing we know, all these various, I call them rocks, start flying at us, right?
Mm.
And we want to say, when's it going to stop? When's life going to calm down? It doesn't. Life doesn't calm down. I call it the 1 minute reset. And there's so many ways to do the 1 minute reset, but I like to basically, depending on, I do a check-in. Where am I? Sometimes the reset has to do with I'm afraid, right? Oh no, this is happening. I could lose my job. This is when I was working. Oh no, this is happening. I'm never going to be able to dot, 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 whatever. So to me, I like Tony Robbins' work. He has 3 core fears: loss, less, and ever. It's really easy to assess. So if it's fear that I'm dealing with, okay, I'm breathing in calm, I'm breathing out fear, and then I'm affirming all is well, and I trust that all is well.
Mm.
In some cases, I'm breathing in, calm, I'm exhaling frustration, and I'll affirm I'm handling it. I got this, and it's kind and gentle to me. And what the outside world is experiencing is someone who's centered and calm rather than when I was reactive, which would be, especially with fear, an instant reaction. My body would get tense and I'd feel like that, like real tight in a second. And I would sometimes blurt something out inappropriately, like, oh no, and that creates fear in others too, right? So those 2 simple practices are maintenance strategies that you get to when you learn the Aurora method, because it's now, how do you do this? And what I find is each person has their own way to reset. Some folks like to use prayer. Others like to, I like walking meditation too. I'll take a 5 minute walk. Sometimes I walk an hour a day to just clear my mind. It's part of my routine. Some people don't have time for that, but what do? They might do yoga. There's so many things, and it's each person finding what brings them that groundedness, and then learning once you can calm your body, then learning what to do with those traits that you've discovered about yourself and how to redirect them quickly to reset.
It's interesting to hear you speak of these methods, these aspects, these steps, if you will. And then what comes flooding into my mind is that which is in the past, most recent past. And I know that I've said this out loud, that whatever happened before the 12th of October of 2025, it's gone. It's done. It's over. There is no more connection to that place where we were renting, nor the people who were renting to us. Let it go. And yet my mind is going, okay, I need to contact the attorney and say, hey, send this note to them saying, send the security deposit, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, stop, stay, you know, uh, it's, it seems to me that one of the other steps in the Aurora method has to do with embracing daily mindfulness
Mhm.
as the foundation for inner peace,
Mhm.
which leads me to something we promote quite regularly on this program. We ask people to take some time during this decade of perfect vision, the 2020s, to go into that small, quiet, peaceful, still place and listen to that still, small voice. And that is where we are going to get not only the peace of mind, maybe some inspiration, et cetera, and encouragement, because that's one of the interesting things. If we wish to view the divine as a father figure, there's no condemnation there. All
Mhm.
right,
That's love.
we're doing the best we can,
Mhm.
but we ask people to listen to that still small voice for the guidance
Mhm.
along with everything else. And sometimes it's just sitting quietly and letting what's called the monkey mind chatter away. Um, a long time ago, when I started learning about meditation, for example, it was the way it was presented. It was, what you want to do is you want to get the quiet the mind. You want to tell the mind basically to shut up, quiet down, quiet. It's not going to happen because the mind is like a child. And then it was a suggestion a couple of decades ago, to ask the mind to be quiet. Okay, sit still. I'll be back. Don't worry. And then one of my guests said, well, why don't you try this? Because the mind is like a child, with only one rule: invite the mind to come with you.
Mhm.
But the rule is you have to be quiet. You have to be quiet. And then what we'll do is we'll take all that cool stuff that you heard and I heard, and then we'll just go crazy together making stuff and creating things, and the imagination will just go wild. And that seems to me that you acknowledge the fact that you are a believer. I find it interesting, some of the stories I'm hearing today. Number one, my parents, they have and my, of course, my father's passed on, but my parents have had no use for organized religion. They believe in God. They have all of the beliefs that they still have, but because of what they've seen in the world. Sorry. And by the way, I don't see anywhere in the New Testament where Jesus ever said, build a building to bring the people to.
Mhm.
Okay. But the other thing that is interesting is there are people now who are refusing to. They are no longer calling themselves by the name of the faith,
Mhm.
because historically That was and of course, we're talking now in the original languages, and I have no idea what that is. But what's been translated into the name of the faith, they say that was a derogatory word used to demean and belittle and abuse those people who did believe. So they say, I'm a follower,
Mhm.
okay, and so forth. But then there's another element of it too. There are also people who are saying, I want nothing to do with what's going on in the world today. I mean, we're in it, but not of it. To the extent that there's nowhere where Jesus ever said, take up arms and go after your enemies. He said, love your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you. And then I heard something about those things. The only way that you would love your enemies or pray for those who persecute you is if you had enemies.
Mhm.
As far as I know, I have no enemies. So I don't have to love them because they don't exist.
Mhm.
And the persecution, and that's another element. I hear this business about how, everybody's trying to stop people from wishing a Merry Christmas and all of this. Where? And I came to this realization, Tracy, and forgive me for going on so long. This whole business of persecution, and they're all upset and they want to pass laws to prevent it and so forth, the whole hate crime thing. Do you not recall in the Bible, in the New Testament even, that you as a believer would be persecuted? So what's happening to you is supposed to happen to you. Now, if that's assuming you're being persecuted, I'm not. Okay. Um, but it seems as though there are people today, I'll call them on the fringe right now, or maybe it's the people that are the loudest and screaming into the social media and the news that are the loudest, and it's you and I that aren't there. But it seems as though the people that are screaming the loudest, they have no clue as to what the message is that he brought. No
Mhm.
clue whatsoever. They talk about religion. You want to know what religion is? And it's defined in the Bible. It's not building a building and having people come in and saving them and all this kind of stuff. No, it's taking care of the widows and the orphans and the children.
Mhm.
That's what it's about.
Mhm.
It's not nationalism. It's not patriotism. Because, correct me if I'm wrong, it's God's way or the highway. If you're a follower, you don't get, if you choose to follow, that's it. Now you follow.
Mhm.
And that's where the still small voice comes in. So talk to us about this book, which I think is wonderful. I love the concepts that you share in this book, which is, by the way, folks, it's called Life Storms, and we got them. They come and they go. But what's nice is, even if it were a hurricane, yeah, it'll pass over. In the eye, it's calm. All right, so you get
Exactly.
to sort of regroup and re-strengthen, right? But share with us a little bit about this aspect of using of incorporating one's faith in this process. I guess we could say that what you call the Aurora method.
Yeah. So
I know I said a lot, but
yeah, I know, and there's so many things I want to say right now. The most important thing, I loved what you said in terms of it's not about building a building, because my grandfather, he studied to be a priest, and he was sadly rejected because he stuttered. But my grandfather practiced Catholicism with us
hmm
and taught us the teachings. And and his message was always clear. It was about kindness and acceptance and tolerance and love. And the challenge that we have to do that, because and again it goes back to beliefs, you know
hmm
what I mean? And so, and the most important thing, and the one that I personally have promised, God, is that I really want to address the idea of this self-centered trait that many of us have, which is self-righteousness,
yeah,
which is nothing more than a moral belief that my way is better than your way. But when we really look at the teaching, what self-righteousness does, it really, in my mind, creates destruction of
yeah,
connection. because I always do this. It's like, oh, no, my way is better. Oh, no, no, no. And then it does this. And if there's
Mhm.
one winner at the top, everyone else is dejected, right? And the person that you're dealing with or the persons that you're dealing with feel dejected. So I just wanted to say that.
Yeah.
But in terms of faith, I do incorporate my faith into it every day.
Hmm.
I basically, the prayer of protection that is a prayer that I love, and there's so many prayers that I love, Catholic prayers that I basically, put in. And so when you do your 5 minutes of daily mindfulness and you do your conscious intention, everyone has their way of quieting their mind. And so the first thing I want to say for me is I have learned two techniques to quiet actually that tick I call it ticker tape. You called it the monkey. I know other people call it the chatterbox, and it's just like grrr, and it's like ticker tape in my mind. But I have learned that if I pray out loud, no thoughts get in. And so I have made it a practice to pray out loud so that I don't hear the chatter. And I have chosen my own prayers. There's about 5 prayers that I do every morning as part of my setting my intention for the day. And when I do that out loud, nothing gets in. Then, as time has gone on, because I've been doing this practice for a long time, I challenge myself to do it without speaking. And so, and what I do is I'll find that if I'm practicing my prayers, so, I personally, as I said, there's 5 that I do.
Hmm.
And as I'm doing them, what I find is if the ticker tape comes in, I challenge myself to start it and get through it without letting the thoughts get in. That sometimes can take me 15 minutes in the morning. I try to do it in 5. So if I can't get it done and I'm in a rush, I'll do it out loud. But I have found that doing the prayer in quiet and when I hear the tickers, because I'll be in the middle of a prayer and all of a sudden I'm like over here and I'm like talking, I'm like saying like I got a this and this and I'm like, where did that even come from? Right. So then no, we're gonna go right back to the beginning and I do my whole routine and I've created a routine for myself using my faith. And that to me is how I start my morning intention. What I have built into it is I have also built in gratitude. I once stumbled across, I went to a retreat and they gave me a little prayer book and they were Catholic prayers. And so it was a long form of the serenity prayer with a morning intention.
Hmm.
And I loved it. And it was, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Thy will, not mine, be done. Living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, and accepting hardship as the pathway to peace, taking as Jesus did, this
Hmm.
world as it is, not as I would have it.
Hmm.
Trusting that God will make all things right if I surrender to his will, and that I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with him forever. And basically that to me, it was a prayer that just it blew my mind because then I can use the shortened form of that prayer especially when I'm doing a reset. I've sat in meetings where I'm frustrated at work, and it's like, God, grant me the serenity in my mind, grant me the serenity, accept things I cannot change. I can't change this person's opinion. The
Hmm.
courage to change the things I can. What can I do right now? And when I do that, that's again overcoming a negative thought. Because I know at work sometimes I'd want to get into the battle of changing the opinion, or I'd want to get into a who's right fight with my spouse, right? And like I said, it always leads to disconnect. So what I have found is when we find the prayers that resonate with us, um, you know, we can really start our day there and then incorporate the practices of the Aurora method, which is really the redirection piece. So getting back to the long form of the serenity prayer, then there was a thing where it would say, God of my life, I welcome this new day. And this was the long form that went into the morning intention. And I love this. So it's God of my life, I welcome this new day. It is your gift to me.
Hmm.
And then you can practice gratitude right there. I thank you for the gift of being alive this morning. I thank you. And I just go through the whole thing. I thank you for my spouse's health, longevity, and safety. I thank you for my health, longevity, and safety. And I go through everyone in my life, and that takes about 2 minutes. And then from there, if I'm going to affirm what I'm going to be today, then once I do my gratitude, when I'm done with that, I move on to the next phase, which is I affirm I'm kind, I'm understanding, I'm open and receptive to, I always do I'm open and receptive to, and I always say challenges, but in my work, I will say I'm open and receptive to God's challenges. I embracing them as opportunity. And I just go through the whole motion of what my intention is for the day. And as I said, when I do the prayer part of it, it usually takes 3 to 5 minutes. I have my quiet, then I set my intention, which takes a minute. And then I do my resets during the day. And that's how I've redirected. But getting to this place took me to understand these self-centered traits. And why I love Emmett Fox's Sermon on the Mount, because he breaks down what Jesus was saying. And it was really about aligning our thinking, our consciousness, and that's what I try to practice daily. And by aligning my consciousness with goodness and kindness and tolerance and acceptance, I find, to your point, I don't have enemies. Now,
Mhm.
people might be upset with me because they have their own belief system that's
Mhm.
comparing themselves to me. But for so long, I used to think I'm not worthy because they were reacting to that. But
Yeah.
today I claim the gift that I was given. And and I practice and I accept sometimes if someone's not able to accept me or tolerate, not I guess tolerate's a harsh word, but tolerate from the perspective of from their own, from their own model of the world and their
Mhm.
own work in their minds. If they don't do the work that I do, then it's okay. I don't need them in my sphere, but I need to be among them. And
Yeah.
that's a lot of the teachings that I've taken away as well. And that to me is really how I've adopted the Aurora method using my faith.
Two things. Number one, tolerate. I have rejected that word. I have removed it from my lexicon and replaced it because it has judgment in it. I'm going to tolerate you. And that has
Mm-hmm.
judgment. So I've replaced it with accept. It doesn't mean
Hmm.
that I like what you're saying or doing.
Right.
What it's saying is, I accept you as a member of the human race. You have every right to be here just as much as I do. I may or may not like what you're saying or doing. Doesn't matter. The reality is, I'm here doing my thing and you're here doing your thing. Hopefully, we can collaborate, but if not, hey, then I'll live my life, you live your life. Thanks so much. God bless and be on your way.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I look at tolerance too as acceptance, and
Yeah,
and so again, it goes back to what my grandfather taught me, and basically, it's just I just interpreted it as that. But I see
yeah,
what you're saying. It can
yeah,
come across as a judgment, and I work so hard not to live in that space of judgment because I
yeah,
find that judgment again comes from our own belief system,
yeah.
and it keeps us separate.
Yeah.
So,
And then there are institutions that tell us who our enemies are. The
mhm,
government will tell us, oh, this country and that country and the other. I'm sorry. They're not my enemy. They might be yours, but they're
mhm.
not mine. But what they're doing is no, 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 no. My life is moving along the way it's supposed to. I'm not going to accept your list. All right. And so it's one of those things where we as individuals we need to come to an understanding of who the other 8.5 billion people are on the planet.
Mhm.
They're people. They're
Yep.
human beings. They're
Right.
children. Whether and you can argue this all you want. Sorry, they're children. They're all children of God.
Mhm.
They're all children of God. Doesn't mean that they're necessarily following, but they're here. They were
Mhm.
created by the
Mhm.
method that was created to create more human beings.
Mhm.
And that's one of the things that has always frustrated me. And that's why I've been so saddened back in 1980, 81 with Jerry Falwell's attitude towards gays when AIDS was rampant.
Mhm.
And when he passed away, the only thing I could think of was, well, now he knows the truth. All right. Now he knows the truth. But
Mhm.
it's like the separation, the division we have specifically in this country.
Mhm.
It's it's like I grew up in a family of eight, six kids and two parents. We were on rare occasions very mildly divided by sex. Four sisters and a mother, brother, myself, and my father. Okay, five against five against three, so to speak. But it was never contentious. It was in fun.
Hmm.
My parents raised us to go our own way. They did not want us to go a particular way. They gave us all of the tools. I mean, this massive toolbox that I now have to create the kind of life that I want.
Hmm.
And I think that's part of what you are trying to share with folks through Life Storms
Yep.
as we continue here on Tell Me Your Story. Tracy Doyle is my guest. Irish?
Irish.
You're a
And
fine Irish Catholic lass. Oh, yes,
that's
yes.
right. That's right.
I was born and raised Catholic as well. It's one of the things that I have loved about being raised in that tradition, as well as my first wife was Byzantine Catholic. The
Mm.
rituals, the tradition, the ceremony. I used to produce a program. It was really funny because it was called the Radio Family Rosary Hour.
Hmm.
It was
Hmm.
only a half hour long. I never
Mm.
understood that, but that's okay. But I learned the joyful and the sorrowful, and oh my goodness, I'm trying to think of the other mysteries that you would pray the rosary with. But I used to get comments from people, criticism, because it was a Christian station and this program was on there. And of course, there's always that little contentiousness. And they said, oh, the rosary is nothing. There's nothing in the Bible about, praying these, well, if you took a little more time to research each line in the rosary, you would notice that every line is in the Bible.
Hmm.
Okay. So don't give me that. Plus the fact, do you ask other human beings to pray for you? Well, yeah. Do you know what they call that? It's called intercessory prayer. You can do that with the saints, with Mary, the mother of Jesus, with Mary Magdalene, with Peter, Paul, John, etc. The angels, the archangels, people, family that's passed on. I can go to my dad, my sister, my dear friend Doug, and hey, would you guys intercede? Would you pray for me? Would you, step in the breach here because I'm really, really struggling. That's what it's about.
Hmm.
Okay. And then, of course, I've always found that especially within the Catholic tradition, all of the icons, if you will, statues, whether it's the stained glass, whether it's the scapula, or maybe you're wearing a St. Jude or St. Christopher medal around your neck and those kinds of things. If that helps your faith, what's it hurting?
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
I would say if you get a copy of this wonderful book, Life Storms, and read it. By the way, is it available in Audible yet?
It is available in Audible. It's available as an ebook, and it's on Amazon in hardcover and paperback.
Oh, I'm going to go get me an Audible copy. I
Yep.
love listening to books. I
And the
really do.
exercises that are in the book are actually available if you're listening to Audible. It'll direct you where to go to a private site and download the tools.
Oh, very, very cool. Well, folks, please, Life Storms, Finding Your Clear Sky Practices. 2, overcome negative thinking, build connection, and find fulfillment. I want to talk about that, but first I remind you that are listening and watching that this is Tell Me Your Story. We're talking with the author of Life Storms, Tracy Doyle, and I want to talk about this last aspect. It's certainly navigating, overcoming negative thinking, and of course, building connection, we've talked about, but I want to talk about finding fulfillment. Um, that is almost a foreign concept to the teachings going back for me anyway, within Catholicism specifically, of the 60s and 70s, 1970s, as the messages have started to change both in within Catholicism, but overall in within Christendom. And working at the Christian radio station, it was hellfire and brimstone in the early 80s, but it began to transform, like with people like Zig Ziglar. Okay,
Hmm. Hmm.
talk to us about the importance of finding one's fulfillment.
Yeah, for me, having been on this journey, what I found was I was a high achiever living to just keep proving something to someone. Who that someone was, I don't know. But ultimately, what I have found is that fulfillment is personal joy. What makes me happy? And for me, emotional fulfillment is what I was really seeking. Having abundance meant to me being a part of my family, sharing experiences with my family, and having the means to do those things and the things that really matter. So what matters to me, sharing experiences with my family, helping others. Helping others is a big part of what gives me joy and fulfillment. Nothing warms my heart more than doing that. And then the personal things that I like to do. So that fulfillment is really about that centeredness, that calmness, and finding the joy with just everyday life and people in it. So that to me is what it's all about.
Well, I love it, and I find it interesting. I've asked this question of many of my guests. Do you think that the founding fathers knew something, even if it was just intuitively, when they incorporated into the three ones that they list? They say that there are these inalienable rights, and among them are life, liberty. But do you think they knew something when they put that phrase in, and the pursuit of happiness?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think our founding fathers were deeply spiritual. I've read so many, especially I personally like George Washington and the things that he wrote about. And I just really believe that the pursuit of happiness was that joy and finding the fulfillment to live in emotional freedom. And I think emotional freedom is what I seek today, and that freedom is what gives me my joy, and it also gives me my purpose.
Yeah. That's another aspect too. It's funny too. I start to compare and contrast the messages going back 40 and 50 years that I heard as time went on and how they changed, and how those who were changing to a more positive message, if you will, were criticized like you would not believe. And I'm seeing more and more little documentaries and videos on the history, not only of Christianity, of the Catholic Church and Protestantism, but also of the Bible and its history and going deep. I mean, they're doing a deep dive into this stuff and saying, you do realize that what you've been taught has been wrong all this time. And one of the points that they make is in reference to
Hmm.
who we are, and it says it right in the Bible, that very book. But if you were to challenge someone and say, do you know that you are God? You are part of God? Jesus said it. And he also said that the kingdom, you don't have to wait until you die because the kingdom of God is
Yeah.
within you. And that we are more powerful than, shall we say, putting it on a material earthly level, than 10 billion atomic bombs. The
Hmm.
things that you can accomplish. And when Jesus talked about the miracles and then saying, hey, that's nothing, you guys are going to do greater works than these, that is some incredible stuff that somehow is starting to come out. People
Hmm.
are starting to be told by others who have been researching that it doesn't matter whether the word in the one of the Ten Commandments is "Thou shalt not murder." It shouldn't be kill; it should be murder. To which I challenge and say, so for 2,000 years, or let's say 1,500 years since the Gutenberg Bible and maybe the English translations, I don't know when those started. Everybody's been wrong until you came along and enlightened everybody.
Hmm.
It's
Hmm.
like, I'm sorry, I'm not buying it. And if that's the case, then take a look at the writings of Paul regarding what's referred to as the rapture passage. It's not literal.
Hmm.
We're not going to be, our feet are not going to be leaving the earth and floating up into the sky. Okay. It's an internal process, and that it never said that there was going to be a second coming. It just said there was going to be a return, but it didn't say how many times. And
Hmm.
that's an internal returning within each one of us. And when I
Exactly.
read that from the gentleman who wrote the book Apocalypse Conspiracy, John Noe, he
Hmm.
talked about that. He in his research, right? This is, by the way, going back 35 years that I read this and interviewed him. And when I read this stuff, it was so liberating.
Hmm.
It was like, oh my God, I'm in the world. Yes, I just bought a house. I'm in the world. Okay. But I'm not of it. And you're trying to share with people, yeah, there are storms in the world.
Well, the storms are internal, and that's the idea,
Yeah.
right? So it's really working through those internal storms that happen daily and finding your clear skies. How do you shift your perspective in the midst of the storm rather than getting caught up in all of the external stuff that's happening around us?
It's
And
so
when we go,
exciting.
right, when we
Yeah.
go in and when we go in and we start to really shift ourselves internally, we're practicing kindness. We don't realize it. But as we're acknowledging things and we're practicing kindness, I believe that, change happens just one person at a time.
Yeah. It
Um,
doesn't matter what's going on the East Coast or the West
right.
Coast or the South Coast or anywhere else in the world, though we are compassionate and we would like to see people treated better and all those kinds of things. But man, you realize how much power you really do have. And it's not a power that you usurp over anybody. It's that power to know who you are and where you are and where you're going.
Hmm.
Like finding your purpose, your life's purpose. Fascinating stuff. I will say, Tracy Doyle, author of Life Storms. This has been. I'm excited about what you've done, and I'm gonna get an Audible version. I'm a subscriber, as a matter of fact, so I have wonderful. I think I have like 5 or 6 credits I haven't used for a while, so
Right.
I
Well,
think
then
I'm
you
gonna.
can you can grab my coffee. That would be great.
I'm going to do that. Absolutely. And looking forward to further conversations with you. This is fascinating. I didn't realize that A, we were kindred spirits as far as Catholicism was concerned. B, as far as our Irish heritage, although mine's a little smaller than I thought, but I'll take it anyway. With the last name Dugan. And I thank you so much for being a part of the work that we're doing here to try to raise that consciousness. It's really what you're talking about. Raise the
Right.
consciousness,
That's
shift and change our perspective, which very briefly is my analogy of an event happening within a circle. And we're standing on the points of the circle. And I encourage people, move around the circle as far around as you can to increase your perspectives so you have a greater understanding, because standing in one spot doesn't really serve you as far as trying to, if you're evaluating the situation. They say that if you see a car wreck and you interview 10 different people, you're going to get 10 different answers or descriptions. So you be that person and then be the second person and the third person as you move around that circle. So changing perspectives is powerful. So thank you for sharing this all
Thank you.
with us through your book, Life Storms.
Thank you. Thank you. And I just want to say to anyone who's listening out there that if you are struggling with shifting perspective and you feel like you're struggling and you're in conflict, if you do go to my website, you can book a complimentary one-on-one with me, and I'd be happy to share with you how the Aurora Method could help you.
Oh, very cool. Very cool. Folks, please, tracydoyle.life. That's the website. I
That's
love how they've broadened that out. I remember when it was just .net,
it. Mm-hmm.
.net, and then .com.
.com. Right. That's right.
And then it expanded, and now it's like, I guess you can actually pick pretty much any dot whatever you want, which is really, really very cool. Well, I have 3 final questions that I ask all of my guests. I want to ask you, but before I do, I want to thank you for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story: New Paradigms for a New World, where we're giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., Wednesdays at 9 a.m., and Monday through Friday from 8 to 9 a.m. 9 programs, folks. 9 programs, 9 different guests, 9 different topics. We hope you will join us at those times, streaming live at richarddugan.com with podcasts on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, Blueberry, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, and we're on YouTube where you can watch these conversations. And I hope that you will subscribe as well as click notification. We also ask that you go to Amazon.com to pick up a copy of my book, Choices: 5 Steps for Life, available in hardcover, paperback, and Kindle. I do have it in Audible form. I just haven't figured out how to get it up there. So I did put somebody else's book up when I produced their audio book years ago, and it was so simple, but Amazon has made it a little more complicated, so I have to find another way. But I will get it out there. The recordings are done. I just have to figure that out. And it will be available soon. By the way, if you'd like to leave us a tip, we have a tip jar. It's called PayPal. And if you go to richarddugan.com, you have links to both Amazon and PayPal where you can get a copy of the book as well as support us in that respect with a tip. And then we ask you to take some time during this decade of perfect vision, the 2020s, to go within to that quiet, peaceful, calm, still place and listen to that still small voice. With all that being said, we go to our final three questions for a very special guest. And the first of those three questions is, who is Tracy Doyle?
So Tracy Doyle, is a very successful entrepreneur who built and led an award-winning multi-million-dollar business, but today is someone who is committed to helping others who are struggling with emotional burnout as a resilience coach.
What gets you up in the morning?
What gets me up in the morning is having the ability to not only help others, but to really serve my family. I serve my mentally ill sister. I serve my niece because she asked me for help 4 years ago, and I guide her. And basically, I serve my family and my spouse.
Mm. And finally, what was your best day?
Oh, gosh, I have so many good days. I don't even know what my best one was. I'd have to really think about that. But I mean, I would say that probably my best day of late was 4 years ago. My niece, I didn't realize how disabled my sister was, and my niece asked me for help. And I uprooted my life and I left my home here in New Jersey and I moved to South Carolina to care for her. So my best day, which I consider my greatest achievement, was having provided a stable environment for my niece. She graduated high school and I was there to celebrate that graduation. And I was the person who took her because she got a presidential scholarship to a college here in New Jersey and she just started college. So I would say that that day and the day that I took her to school was probably the two best days because I look at that as my greatest achievement.
Thank you so much for sharing your time. I know we went over, and I appreciate that. You can blame your lateness on your next interview on me. All right. Tell them Dr. Deek just kept you late. It wasn't detention, but thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity.
And thank you for joining us here on Tell Me Your Story, for tuning in and listening in and watching. And until our next broadcast, podcast, videocast, love to Lal. Jeanette, I'm still listening. Dad, continue to be happy because I am. Smokey, I'll see you on the other side. Mike, thanks for being in my life and letting me be in yours. And to my dear friend Zorro, aho, aho.